This is the All About 80s Music podcast with John Micek and Steve Augello.
Hey, this is Steve Augello, and I'm here with John Micek.
How's it going, Steve?
Going well, John. The dB's are an indie pop band whose career started in the late 70s, spanned throughout the greatest decade, and they're still going strong today. Their debut album has just been remastered, re-released, and is out now, available on the dB's.com. Join us for John's interview with Peter Holsapple and Will Rigby.
Will Rigby and Peter Holsapple, thanks for joining the All About 80s Music podcast. Nice to have you here.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having us.
You bet. Let's talk about it. Stancher Decibels reissued. What was the occasion for it? Was the time just right? Or how did walk me from point A to point B? How did we get here?
An alarm went off on my phone, and it was like, oh my God, it's been 42 years. Not really.
So, was it just sort of the timing was right to do it? Did it feel like, there's been any number of reissues down the years, the IRS one, the Collector's Choice collection. This is the first vinyl reissue, or first vinyl release in the U.S.
Well, the enthusiasm of Propeller Sound was probably the precipitating factor in its release, this current release. Because they were really, they'd been wanting to do it for a while. They already put out an album of early first album dB's recordings. And they're just super enthusiastic about making the dB's recordings available.
So, again, it has been 42 years. Peter, start with you. We listen to this record now. What do you hear? What does it, what does it conjure for you? What are you hearing in the songs now?
Honestly, I have not listened to the reissue, but I have pulled up various songs on YouTube and stuff, and I've got all the old records. So I think what I hear largely is that the production of the record, which is largely due to Chris Stamey's involvement, it has managed to do what we sort of set out to do, which is to make a record that you could play decades later and still hear stuff fresh and new and interesting, stuff that you might have not heard before, songs that hold up after decades. So I think that's kind of what I get from the reissue myself.
Will, how about you?
I think it doesn't sound like other records that came out around that time, and I like that about it. I can't really think of anything to compare it to from around that same time.
Mm-hmm. And you guys are kind of slotted into the Southern pop tradition these days, but the dB's were very much a New York band. You were living in New York, you were working in New York, you were recording in New York. I was a little young for that era, but it seems like it was a pretty special and magical time. What was it like being a young band in New York, 78, 79, 80, sort of that first coalescence of American youth?
New York was a lot more bohemian still. When it was kind of the last of that. It's like Manhattan is now like a rich person's playground. But it was still pretty bohemian when we moved there. And New York was very run down at the time. It had just narrowly avoided bankruptcy in 1977. So it was a pretty run-down place when we got there. And I loved it. I thought it was great fun.
Peter, how about you?
Yeah, I kind of always wanted, as you pointed out earlier, I was born in Greenwich, Connecticut, and we moved to North Carolina when I was 6, but I don't think I ever let go of the idea of returning to the area. We would read the New York Times on Sunday, and I would look at all the stuff at the Shaper skating rink, that were the concerts that were playing there, and the Fillmore and things like that, and every so often get a Village Voice. So when I got the call from Will to come up and audition for Chris Stamey and the dB's, I was like, this works into my plan, I think when you're growing up in Winston-Salem, as we all did, the two alternative places that you can go after you get out of college is you either stay in Winston-Salem and work for your family business, or you move to Atlanta and do stuff there, or you move to New York. And so New York just seemed like the right option for us. I love living up there. That's the one place I miss living. But I think I also miss the time that Will is talking about specifically.
Let me press rewind for a second. For listeners who are not familiar, I mean, how did that first lineup come together? I mean, all of you grew up together, playing together in Winston, that kind of thing. But like, what led to sort of that first sort of coalescence of the quartet?
Well, Chris moved to New York in 1977 and played in Alex Chilton's band that year. And then Alex moved back to Memphis at the end of 77. And so Chris was looking for something new to do, and he decided that he wanted to play some gigs under his own name. And in June of 78, Gene and I moved there, started playing with Chris, and played, 8 or 10 gigs before Peter joined the band in October. And that was pretty much the lineup that made the records.
And Peter, there were suddenly two songwriters in the band, and obviously there was enough space in there for the two of you to function. And what was that relationship like with you and Chris early on?
Well, he and I had worked together for years in North Carolina, as you pointed out, and we had, I feel like we had tremendous respect for each other's songwriting. So to get to play Chris's songs, which was ostensibly the reason that I moved to New York to join the band, was to be the keyboard player and background vocalist for Chris's music. But I came with a bunch of songs, and so it became sort of evident that everybody wanted to do my stuff as well. And there was a point where Mitch was also going to possibly join up with us, and we would sort of have this sort of rotating rhythm section for whoever. And so I tend to think of it like the Kinks or the Who, whoever booked the band, dB's and the Kinks, that kind of deal. But Mitch ended up doing a studio. He tried to start one in New York, and then he moved back to Kernersville, excuse me, and started driving down there because it was fairly obvious that it's really hard to start a commercial studio in Manhattan when you're up against places like Power Station and Blue Rock, where we recorded our first record. So Chris and I ended up as the guys doing the songs in the band.
Alan Detrock, the New York rocker publisher, he had a production credit on Stands for Decibels. If I remember my history correctly, you guys recorded there, you rehearsed there. There might have even been a sleeping bag in the office, if I remember my reading correctly. What did he bring to the table? It seemed like he was an encouraging soul at exactly the right time. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, he was more like an executive producer, where he was like the one finding the money to go in the studio, and he was there when we were recording a lot of the time, not all of the time, but he was generally there, and he had a few things to say, but generally he just was like a presence overlooking the whole thing.
And if I remember correctly, Black and White came out on his label at first.
That's correct.
Right? Yeah. I have
Correct.
a copy of that kicking around back there. Was that one of the couple of songs that you brought in at first, Peter?
I try to think back on that. I think that the songs that I really brought in when I first got up there were like Bad Reputation and The Fight. I think Black and White I may have written when I was in New York early on, but I'm not positive. I don't think that came up with me from Winston or from Chapel Hill and Memphis, where I had been before. So,
now that I have both of you figuratively in the same room, I've always wanted to ask what it was in the water at Reynolds High School that produced such a rich scene. I remember living down there. It seemed like a very special place. Was there anything particular sort of like sparked the creative juices, or was it just a lucky happenstance that so many of y'all were in the same place at the same time?
I think it's a coincidence, personally. You could make an argument that like the tobacco in the air had something to do with it, but because there certainly was tobacco in the air. There's no doubt about it. So maybe we're getting high on that.
I tend to think that one of the things that made it so good for players was that there were so many good players that you could not be a bad player and get away with it. I mean, there were probably some not very good bands, but most of us played in bands that really took the time to learn the songs correctly. And, you know, when you've got people out there standing there looking like this at your left hand while you're playing a Spooky Tooth song, it's like, you know you better play it right. You know, I mean, because everybody else was playing the song, and they could tell if you were faking it or if you really had it. So I think that the general community of musicians set the bar really high for everybody else, and that's why so many of them are still playing today.
Well, I want to ask you the rhythm section question. Playing with Gene and how you two read each other. Because I listened to your playing. He's got a really great melodic sense. You have a really great compositional sense. I was listening back to the record this morning. Just wondering about the interplay between the two of you.
Well, it was not really something we sat around thinking about at the time. I'm more in awe of Gene's playing now than I ever have been. I just listened back to old dB's recordings, and the thing that I keep thinking is, wow, what a great bass player. And I think, you know, we gelled and still do, really. I still play with him some, and it's still, to me, greater than the sum of the parts. So I think it's just something that happened, and it's a good thing.
And I'm going to throw this out there also, and Will can just agree or disagree, but I think that Will and I have played together for so long also, and as far as a rhythm guitar and a snare player, I think we connect that way really, really closely, and that's one of the things that allows Chris and Gene to kind of go off on their flights of fantasy and have a safe place to land, because they know that we're going to be holding down that part of it.
I just to continue. I was listening to Cycle for a second this morning, and you come in with the snaps and rolls at the beginning, and that's a crisp song. But I was just really struck by the way that whole tune sort of came together.
Well, I wish I could remember. I mean, I don't really remember the genesis of the song. I remember more about the lyrics being written than I do about how we came up with the music. I'm pretty proud of that drum track, though.
Now,
Alan Medrock makes a cameo appearance on that song, saying "transient thing." By the way,
I will have to go back and re-listen now to that. So you're doing some shows behind this, and I guess repercussion re-releases in the offing after this as well. Is that correct?
Yes,
that's the plan. Yeah, I believe it is being mastered either this week or next week. I think repercussion.
Okay. I was looking at the calendar as well. Any Boston dates in the offing?
Not currently. The closest we have right now is Jersey City. There's possibility that we'll do more shows, but right now that's all that's confirmed.
Well, I will keep my fingers crossed in any event. What about the other two records like this and Sound of Music? Might those also see the same treatment? Has there been any discussions to that end, or is that something that sort of exists?
I think we're trying to play these two out right now and just see where things lie with that. I will say that from my personal experience, these are the records that people want to hear. These two records, Stands for Decibels and Repercussion. The other two kind of came out and nobody ever really heard them very much, you know, between the Bearsville losing their distribution the week it came out, and IRS kind of, I don't know, they just weren't able to do anything with Sound of Music, you know. So that record's been out of print since 1988. So it's hard to know whether there's a point in putting those out again.
Obviously, both of you have kept very busy beyond these. You had the Rifters and Hootie. You played with REM. You're playing now with a band called Paranoid Style in Chapel Hill, where you apparently found your flowering as a lead guitar player. What would you say?
It only took 50 years, right? I mean, I think of this as my third act, if you will. That being able to reinvent myself doing something like that is kind of great. I mean, they hired me as a piano player, and then their guitar player didn't show up. And I was like, well, I live 6 minutes up the road. Let me go get my guitar and pedal board. And they liked what I did. So,
and you'll have a new record coming out, your own, fairly soon as well, I think.
In January, that's correct. Watch for it.
I will do that.
68.
Well, I was prepping for this interview as well, and came across a couple of your solo 7 inches. I've got Paradoxaholic kicking around here someplace as well. Anything in the offing from you that we should be aware of?
I hope to have something new out. Right now, my only plan is to put it up streaming. But I have a couple of things that are done.
Let's see, I'm sorry. You scooted through these questions faster than I expected, Jens.
We're just quick talkers. Did you want to ask us about Falling Off the Sky? The record
Yes. Please, I will tell you this, Peter. My daughter was born in 2005, which was the year World to Cry. You guys released World to Cry, so that is now inextricably fixed with my making repeated runs back and forth to Babies R Us. For diapers and formula and the baby clothes she invariably burns through at a rapid clip because, babies. But yes.
I thought you were going to say something about the word cry and baby.
She did cry quite a lot, but that did calm her down. I mean, talk to me about that record as well.
Well, Will pointed out that song in particular is the one that sort of moved the needle toward that I'd written that. I actually wrote that, and that time is gone, and was trying out a new Pro Tools studio that I had in a road case that I took on the road with me with the Hooties. And I spent about 5 days at Hootie's guitar player's house in Allendale, South Carolina, right outside of Charleston. And I set up and I cut a couple of demos, and one was World to Cry and the other was that one. And I was like, wow, okay, so I think I must have sent it to you first, Will? Probably.
I think you sent it, my memory is that you sent it to at least Chris and me, and probably Gene too, and said, this sounds like a dB's song to me. You want to record it? That's the way I remember it.
So we did. We did some tracks up at Water Music in Hoboken, our old haunt.
Yes.
And I can't remember how many songs we did. We did a few. I think we might have also done that version of What Becomes the Broken Hearted there, which to this day is my favorite vocal with the dB's. I don't think I've ever sung anything well. And little by little, piece by piece, we ended up with a bunch of tracks. I think we have about 23 songs or so that we cut over the years. One ended up on Here and Now, the second Holsapple Stamy record. One song I think Chris has recorded for the new Salt Collective record.
But two of them came out on Chris Stamy solo records, two of the dB's tracks, on different Chris Stamy records.
So little by little, one of them is another song that we recorded that is not the same version as on my new solo record. They're kind of sneaking out, but the record that we did, Falling Off the Sky, I think is a beautiful record, and it's a lot of it was done. Chris has a studio in Chapel Hill, and so he did a lot of the heavy lifting, if you will, because of the proximity of the studio to his house. And there's lots of neat stuff on there. I got to write a song with Christian Bush from Sugar Land.
Well, we went to high school with. He's a high school classmate of mine, Christian is.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Totally sweet guy.
Yes.
Just a great guy. And his brother Brandon actually played with the dB's a few times, too. So.
He's on that record, yeah. He's on Falling Off the Sky.
So might there be another dB's record somewhere down the road a piece?
Hard to say. We haven't really talked about it.
No plans at the current time.
That's fun. It's a very small world. Christian is a great guy. I saw him a couple of years ago. He was up in Harrisburg playing some solo shows behind that Trailer Hitch single he put out.
Yeah.
If you heard that one, that was a great tune.
He's a great songwriter, I gotta say. It was a pleasure. I mean, he didn't. Most of that song that we wrote together was sort of mine, but he was a great sounding board, I guess. And not in the traditional Nashville. If you happen to be in the same room and you're reading a magazine, then you get a 50% cut of the songwriting. But he was really good. He was a person that I could sort of bounce ideas off of, and he was very encouraging. And it was a real privilege to get to work with.
That's great. Yeah, you could even tell 1516 was kept for bigger things. All right, I'm going to try a lightning round here, I think, before we part. So we'll start with you. First record with your own money, what was it, and you recall when you bought it?
Oh, boy. Well, it would have been a 45. My own money. Might have been a Glenn Campbell 45. I was a pretty big Glenn Campbell fan when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. My own money.
Yes.
Well, I do know the first LP I bought with my own money was Spare Wires by John Mayall and his Blues Breakers. But there were some 45s before that. I think I bought Sound Asleep by the Turtles and definitely bought Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys on Brother Records.
I'm going to add, I'm pretty sure the first album that I bought was the Rascals' Greatest Hits.
You remember where?
It's somewhere at Thruway Shopping Center. I don't remember where. It might have been at Rose's.
Yeah, there were a couple of stores at Thruway that you could buy records at. Resnick's, where I worked eventually, and Rose's and Woolworth's and Eckerd's. And all of those places, they had to cover them up on Sundays for the blue laws. You could buy albums. But we also had a Singer sewing machine store there, and they had 45s in a rack, and I was able to get Grits Ain't Groceries by Little Milton there. I could never find it anyplace else.
And that was it? That was a Thruway?
Yeah. They were all at Thruway, yeah.
It's been such an awfully long time since I lived in Winston-Salem. I think that's where the Krispy Kreme is now?
Off the street.
Across the street, yeah.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Still is there.
That's what I thought. Currently reading.
Stone Arabia by Dana Spiata.
What is that?
Well, her previous book, Eat the Document, is really, has a lot about rock music in it. I haven't gotten very far on this one, but so far they have attended A Hard Day's Night when they were kids.
Yeah.
Pedal Pusher by Lori Lindeen, who I did not know, but was bandmates with my friend Linda Pittman in Zuzu's Pedals. She just passed away a few days ago. It's a great story.
Mike Knowles' okay. Saturday Night Music.
Funhouse by the Stooges. Of course, that's Sunday morning also. You don't want to be around my house.
I listen to a lot of Bob Dylan and Neil Young.
Okay. Conversely, maybe you might just answer this one, Peter, but Sunday morning music.
Okay, actually, Sunday morning music for me is Dusty in Memphis. No better Sunday morning record there is.
Living Brothers.
Okay. Musician other than yourself, you might have been.
Might have been.
Well, or wish you might have been. Musician other than yourself, you wish you might have been.
I'm tempted to say Keith Moon, but he didn't last very long.
Keith Moon without the crack up, maybe? I don't know.
I admire him a lot.
Yeah.
Wow. Musician-wise, I'd say Wayne Kramer. Songwriting-wise, I'd say Judy So.
And last one for both of you, superpower that nobody knows you have.
Left-handed.
I'm your laundry bitch.
All right. Awesome. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
You bet.